And I'm showing it's 10 o'clock. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Vicky's probably going to have you on your side. Feedback loop.
I think I'm gonna have to call in because this thing is,
Okay. Let's go ahead and get that straightened out.
you're breaking up on my end
Okay.
when I have my mic on.
If you mute your mic, does that make it any better?
It does, but then I won't be able to talk to you as much, and I know that's gonna upset so many people. So I'll just call in probably.
Okay. Are you calling in now?
Needs to find that number, I think,
Yeah,
on there somewhere.
Skype number.
Okay. This is,
All right. While we're waiting on Commissioner Thompson to get done with that, I believe we can go ahead. Commissioner Unum, if you will please read the welcome and notice meeting statement.
A news release announcing the date, time, and place of the July 18th, 2019 Commission meeting was distributed July 17th, 2019 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistants, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
she's calling in. I think we're gonna have to answer the phone somewhere.
It should go directly into the
It
schedule.
should? Okay. She's talking to somebody? I'm reading lips now. Okay. Uh-huh. It always gives you the option to kind of use one or the other.
Okay.
It's so quiet in here.
Vicky,
Lovely.
hey, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you, but when I turn my mic on, is it breaking up for you?
There's a little bit of feedback.
It breaks
You have
up for
your
me.
mic
I
open.
can't hear you. You're kind of coming in and out, but let me try to, do it this way because I can't call in. I just
Okay.
tried that. So somebody's gonna have to call me on my direct line if I'm gonna use the phone line. But we
Okay.
can try this. Is it time to do the invocation?
We were just about to get to the adoption of the agenda. Do we have an option to potentially call her?
We can call her.
Okay.
I can't understand any of that.
Yeah, okay, Vicky, hang on a second. Vicky, we're gonna call you, and then you'll be able to mute the mic and still hear.
Not getting it.
Okay.
You've got her number, right?
Wait a minute. Let me mute it and then you say it again. Hang on.
Gotta look it up. All right, we're gonna call you so that you're on the speakerphone, so you'll be able to see us and just communicate through the speakerphone without the feedback.
It's easier to mute the phone than the computer.
Well, we did have, we had her in earlier.
She should have.
It was fine.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's technology. This is what happens.
Giving us time to read the minutes.
Shh. But it was fun.
It's 7 and then 3.
I did 7 earlier. See if it does now. Yeah.
Try 3.
3?
Yep, she's answering.
Okay.
All right, Vicky, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can now. I just muted my situation. I think I'm situated. Sorry
Okay.
for all the trouble.
No problem, we're good. We just want to make sure you're totally in. All right. The next item is the adoption of the proposed agenda that was distributed. Do I have a motion with regard to that?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda then is the invocation. We'll recognize Commissioner Thompson for that.
Thank you. Let us pray. Dear Lord, we pray for your guidance today, and we pray that we will do your work to the best of our ability and with all of our hearts, as you have instructed us to do. In this month of July, as we celebrate freedom, help us to remember in our discussions that freedom and responsibility go hand in hand. Please watch over the consumers and their families and help us as commissioners to level their path so that they may have an easier walk each day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Next item is the introduction of guests. If we could start at the front to my right, Rufus, if you would begin.
Oh, no. I want to start at the back this time. If that's okay with you. Well, even if it's not okay with you, I'm just going to go ahead and start at the back.
Hi, Ansley Patrick, Executive Director, Office of Academy.
I'm going to get killed.
Lindsay Daniel with Community Options.
Jerry Miles, Oconee County.
Susan John, Horry County.
Ryan Wade, Clarendon County.
Margie Blanson, Arkansas, South Carolina.
Evelyn Turner, Disabilities Board, Charleston County.
Stephanie Williams, Calhoun County DSN Board.
41 Background Center.
Molly Cornell, Harvey Center.
Bob Jones, Newberry County.
Sean Keefe, Sumter County.
Ralph Courtney, Tri-Development Center, Aiken County Board of Disabilities.
Mike Moss, Calhoun County Disabilities and Special Needs Board.
Jason, sorry.
Angela Rodriguez, South Carolina Spinal Cord Injury Association.
Jumpy one here, Jason Tavern, Lawrence.
Dorothy Goodwin, Community Options.
Kellen Felder, DDSN.
Ray Miller, DD Council.
Tricia Harrison, Cleveland, South Carolina.
Beth Franco, PNA.
Good morning, Mike Keith, Marion Dillon, DSN.
Morning, Kathleen Roberts, Witten Center Parents Club, parent of 2 sons that have passed away and still advocating for kidney disability.
Linda Lee, Witten Center Parents Club. My daughter resides there.
Michelle Schaefer, Maxabilities.
Ben Horner, DDSN.
Joyce Kimmer with DDSN.
And Joyce Davis, Brain Injury Association, South Carolina.
Deborah Heather Person, South County.
Rufus Britt, DDSN.
Rob McMurray, DDSN.
Tana Vanderbilt, DDSN.
Pat Maley, DDSN.
Susan Beth, DDSN.
Chris Clark, DDSN.
Thank you very much. I don't think we had anybody else sneak in the back. You did. Y'all getting good at this, as far as adapting. So, next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Hopefully everybody had a chance to review that. Are there any proposed changes, additions, or deletions from the proposed minutes?
I do note that on page 4, under consideration of bids, it indicates that I moved to approve a bid and then I seconded the motion.
Oh,
So I think somebody else moved and I seconded.
okay.
It might have been, I think it was Robin.
I'll look on my notes.
Okay.
Any other proposed changes? So with that amendment, would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Without opposition, the minutes are approved. Next on the agenda is public input. First, we'll recognize Patricia Harrison.
Thank you. I've got 2 issues I'd like to discuss today, and I've got the federal regulation that I want to pass around about targeted case management. Going to pass them around while I'm speaking. My first concern is the taxpayer of the state of South Carolina. I'm hearing rumors that there's a $48 million recoupment. I think all these people here in the room have the right to know if there is such a recoupment, how much it is, where's the money coming from? What I'm hearing through the grapevine is that the former finance person didn't do cost reports. Going back to 2013, if this is the case, all these people need to know because they prepared cost reports and they sent them to DDSN. So if this is true and if there is a huge recoupment like this, where's the money coming from? Because there were 2 big recoupments before. When OIG came in and did a report in 2012 and 2015, which required the state of South Carolina to pay back over $14 million. That came from service dollars, because the General Assembly wasn't informed that DDSN had overbilled Medicaid. And that happened when all these people were suffering because their services were being cut, saying there was a budget reduction, and there was no budget reduction. So that's a concern, and I hope in the finance report that y'all will explain to us, is there a recoupment of up to $48 million? And if so, how does the agency plan to handle it? My other concern is, as an advocate, the targeted case management issue. I don't know a single employee with any local government or state government that when they get in the car and they go to a meeting that is, they have to go to, they don't get paid for travel and they don't get paid for mileage. So I think that I've given you the federal regs, and it has things that can't be covered under TCM, including adoption issues and actually taking a person to a medical appointment. But what I'm hearing is that there are large numbers of providers who either have quit providing services or are going to quit. I'm hearing of large numbers of people at the boards leaving their case management job. And this is a crisis that I don't think this agency has advocated for these people who actually need the services. And you haven't given an opportunity for people like me and for the families to understand what the issues are and for them to actually be involved in the process of establishing those rates. So I think that is something that I understand the line is that, well, HHS is doing that. Well, there should have been more than just telling these board providers, this is the rate. The federal law requires that the providers and the public be involved in establishing those rates. Thank you.
Next, we will recognize Jerry Mize.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes, and I promise I'll just take a few minutes. My name is Jerry Mize. I'm from Oconee. Everybody else up here knows me. And I have been a provider for 38 years. Many of those years, the most of those years, I've been an executive director. And during my tenure as executive director, I have been frustrated many, many times with decisions made on behalf of providers. Now, there's been some good, I have to give some credit. There have been some good decisions, in particular recently. But today, I'm here talking about case management. And I know y'all have heard from my colleague Susan at least a couple of times, and a private provider, I think, last month. But today, I stand before you disappointed and frustrated, and many providers share that feeling with me. I've heard for years that we are partners, and I still believe that we are. But regarding case management, if I was a partner in a private business and was treated the way that we've been treated regarding case management and now possibly early intervention, I would end that relationship. But I don't, because of the families and the clients. We were told by DDSN leadership, our staff were, if y'all don't want to do case management, we have private providers who will. I submit to you, private providers aren't making it either, not financially. You heard Dana from CDS last month get up and tell you and plead with you to do something because they were about to lose $27,000 a month. They can't sustain that. Many of us can't sustain that. We are close. Oconee County is close, but we're not there yet. And the trigger's already been pulled. And so they're working diligently to get to where we need to be. That remark that was made was cold and callous and a slap in the face of providers of case management. This is at a time when many providers in case management are scared of losing their jobs and the benefits that they have worked for many, many years. Commissioner Blackwood, you asked the question, if families will be better off, and I tell you they won't under this current system unless there are some substantial changes. This service delivery system will be jeopardized and it will fail unless you tell HHS we will not operate case management and possibly EI at the current rates. HHS and DDSN pushed providers to be ready and kept hyping us up that we had to be ready by July 1st. A few people may be ready, but many are not. Some are making it financially, just a few, many are not. This week, we learned that another provider had made the decision to end their contract to provide case management. And that's what's going to continue to happen. And good. We are in a crisis and something needs to be done, and it needs to be done quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Now recognize Jason Tavener.
Good morning.
Morning.
Just want to come introduce myself today as the newly elected chair of the South Carolina Human Service Provider Organization. And I do that, one, because I think it's appropriate, and two, because I probably need to. I consider myself a Skyper. I really enjoy listening to your meetings and working at my desk, and that's kind of where I'm comfortable back in Lawrence. But this new role has required that I kind of come to Columbia more often. So, and that's good because the work of the commission, of the leadership of DDSN, it is important. And as needed, I don't know that I'll be here every meeting, but as needed and as the membership directs, I will be coming before you to share information as far from the human service provider organizations, because it's important to our families, to the people we support, to our employees, who make their livelihoods from us. So a little bit about me. I am the executive director for the Lawrence County Disability Special Needs Board. I've been in that role since 2007. This past spring, I was recognized for 20 years of service to the agency, which was kind of one of those moments similar, not the same as when my son came out of the DMV with his license. You know, I was like, wow, that was a moment, right? That 20 years kind of resonated with me. I heard Jerry's 38, and I was like, well, I've got a lot to learn, right? So I'm not there yet. But when I thought about it, I had and I hate to give this analogy, but almost like you know, if the movie The Grinch got the big smile, I had one of those moments where I started thinking about where all this started for me. And, you know, I can give the credit, or you guys can blame, really, this guy right here, Chris Clark. When I was at PC, Presbyterian College, and majored in accounting, he gave me an opportunity as an intern with the Lawrence County Disability and Special Needs Board in their finance department. So we know who to blame, right? Because I do appreciate that opportunity. That was, as I went through this in my mind, I was like, wow, it all kind of, it's a small world, isn't it? We all think it's so big, but it really is kind of small if we get down to it. But in the Human Service Provider Organization, I've served as treasurer, as vice chair. I'd like to now thank Susan for her leadership the last 2 years. I appreciated working with her and thank her for that on behalf of our 46 members. I counted that up real quick this morning, 46 members in our association. And as we go forward, my goals quickly will be, one, internally, I kind of want us to work on our committees. We're going to try to develop working committees and get that going. And externally, to continue to work with the commission, DDSN leadership, because we got some big ticket items, you know, the Mercer State rate study, the case management issue that we're talking about, early intervention, the CMS final rule, it goes on and on. Any one of those alone would be enough, but we've got all those. So I look forward to working with you guys on that. And in conclusion, I would like an opportunity to meet with each of you, to share on behalf of the human service providers what our perspectives are, where we are there. But it maybe more importantly, I'd like for you to continue, because I know some of you have done this, to visit local providers in your area. I think that's very important for you to see what's going on in your communities. I know many have, but I'd ask that you consider that not a one and done moment, maybe an ongoing thing. I know a while back DDSN put a requirement on us, and at the time I was like, man, you know, we go visit, Court Management visits the homes. I started thinking about it, but actually that's one of the best things that I do, and it's a good thing. So I encourage you to visit providers and see what's going on there. But mainly wanted to put a face in front of you with a name. Again, I'm Jason Tavener, and thank you for this time.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the commissioner's update. Commissioner Blackwood.
Yeah. I have a 10-year-old son with Fragile X syndrome, and on Monday, July 22nd, we are hosting an event in the State House where the governor has signed a proclamation for Fragile X Awareness Day in South Carolina. He did it last year, and so we're doing it again this year. And the Lieutenant Governor is going to read the proclamation in an event that we're going to have in the State House lobby. So I wanted just to mention that event, and then just share a little bit about Fragile X syndrome. My son, who's 10, has Fragile X syndrome and is a genetic condition that causes intellectual disability, behavioral and learning challenges, and various physical characteristics. The agreed, the prevalence of Fragile X in males is 1 in about 4,000 and 1 in about 6,000. Girls have Fragile X syndrome, and there is not a cure for Fragile X, but therapies can make a big difference in the lives of people that get the diagnosis of Fragile X syndrome. So I just wanted to raise awareness about Fragile X, let you guys know about it, and invite you to come to our event next Monday at 10:30. Here's a little invitation, and so I just want to mention that. And then I forgot to mention in the last meeting that I attended the Whitney Center Summer Beach Music Bash on June 13th, and it was an amazing event hosted by the Parents Club, and I appreciate the nice welcome that I got visiting that event and learning more about the Whitney Center. So those are the only two.
Commissioner Thompson, any updates?
Sorry, Nikki. No, thank you.
So I have a commissioner update that actually has to do with our lack of commissioners. As many of you know, we expected to have at least one interim appointment to join us on the commission. We have been informed that that interim appointment will not be taking place by agreement between the legislature and the governor's office, an agreement that doesn't really have anything to do with DDSN, but has that impact on us. So at least until the legislature is back in session and can go through the normal appointment process, our commission is at 4 members, which is half strength and has an impact on all of us in terms of the amount of work that we're going to have to do, and also just the fragility of having an actual quorum. We have to have everybody here. So I'm going to commend my other commission members for hanging in there, and we're going to have to just make sure that we're picking up the slack until the legislature is back in session. On that front, I think that segues well into the next item on the agenda, which was supposed to be committee assignments. There's not much point in making committees when we only have 4 members that consist of other individuals or breaking it down. So what my intent is at this point in time is to appoint committee chairs to organize those particular meetings, and then everyone will be serving on every subcommittee at this point in time until such time as we actually have enough commissioners, at least one more, where we can actually make some assignments with regard to these committees that are more meaningful. Commissioner Thompson will continue to chair the policy committee. Commissioner Unum has agreed to chair the legislative committee, and Commissioner Blackwood has agreed to chair the Finance and Audit Committee. I would instruct within the minutes for it to reflect that at such time as any additional commissioners are appointed, that we will be revisiting this, and we will operate under this system until that time. Next item on the agenda under old business, and we have adjusted the agenda just a little bit, as y'all may note, that we actually have a formal old business versus new business section. I believe that will make it easier for us to follow up on certain items. First item under old business.
We gotta do the policy committee update.
Oh, I apologize. I did, absolutely. Would now recognize Commissioner Thompson for the policy committee update. Sorry, Vicki. Didn't mean to skip you.
Thank you.
I
Thanks
was on a
so
roll.
much. Okay, so the policy committee met on July 10th. And at that time, the policy consisted of Lori Unum and myself. Barry Malthus attended also as an ex officio member. So the staff had sent out 6 sets of standards, and there were 15 days of review provided to the public. So one thing that the policy committee needs to do is to determine what is a more reasonable time frame, especially in the middle of summer when we send out 6 sets at a time. So that's something that's on our action item list. So during this committee meeting, I wanted to note here too that I also pointed out there were no standards for SLP3. And both Oconee County and Community Options have SLP3 programs. So I hope that we will see some SLP3 standards soon. We need to obviously have standards if we're going to operate programs. So on July 10th, the policy committee approved 3 of the 6 sets of standards. So the first set of standards approved by the committee were the new standards for individual employment service. There are only a few comments from the ARC, and those were resolved by staff. So on behalf of the committee, we recommend that the standards for individual employment service be passed as presented.
All right, coming out of committee, we'll treat that as a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion with regard to that particular policy? Hearing none, would then entertain a motion to approve that policy as presented? Second.
Second.
Thank you. The second standard set of
Hang on one second,
standards-
Vicki. Let me get the vote formal.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
You're fine.
Barely.
You're fine. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Now,
Okay, the second set of standards approved by the committee were the new standards for group employment service. There were a few comments and questions by HHS and Charles Lee Center. Those issues were also resolved by staff. I don't know what you have in front of you, but the committee changed the reference from legal guardian to legal guardian and personal representative if applicable. So half of the committee, we recommend that the standards for group employment service be passed and presented. Do we need to say with that change, or is that change in your?
do you remember what page that particular line was on?
You know, I don't have page numbers, but I can look. Let's just, we made that change. I don't know if it was still with that change in it.
It was sent out with that change already made.
So
Okay,
with that change, which is in what we were presented, but also with the understanding that change was made. Any further discussion with regard to that policy? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that policy is approved.
Okay, the last set of standards approved by the committee were the revised day license standards, with substantive changes put forth by staff. First, there's an addition of the requirement for locking storage for consumers' personal belongings, which may result in some expense for providers. However, we were told that the storage doesn't have to be individual and can be a locked area for everyone's personal belongings. Although I understand some counties have already locked their.
No, it needs to be, they need to be able to lock their stuff up individually. It is not. No, it doesn't have to be a 1-to-1 ratio because some people bring nothing. So you don't need, if you have 100 people a day program, you really don't have to have 100 lockers because a lot of people, or most of them, don't bring stuff. And those that do like to keep it with themselves. So we didn't say it was a 1-to-1 ratio.
All right, so that's not what we were told in the committee, so I'm wondering, is that a different, have you found out something different since then?
No, that's what was told to the committee.
Well, but when you clarified it, it said there didn't have to be. We'll go back and look at the tape, but that's what you said. I'm gonna move on except for that one. You know, we're just gonna have to develop the side because we were told something different in the committee, but let's move on and see if we can get past the other. There was also the additional final rule requirements that will prohibit future day program facilities from being located adjacent to a public institution or group from being added to a location where 2 or more existing BDSN facilities exist and will prohibit future facilities from having fences. There was clarification of the fire marshal's role, which was good. There was a change recommended by staff to allow drivers to drive consumers around for 90 days without having had defensive driving. And the committee changed that to drivers will have to have defensive driving prior to driving consumers. You know, as it turns out, you know, staff were in agreement with that, or at least Mary was in agreement with that, but it wasn't caught. And so I would just caution the staff that we're not going to always be the ones to catch these things. So they need to be vetted. And there's some concern that I have that the providers aren't on the policy committee or the policy group that sets policies at DDSN, and I don't see any providers that they suggested against it either. So they didn't have a lot of time to review this one, so we need to make sure that you're not relying on us as commissioners to catch these things. So there were major changes to the day program standards. I'm not sure what to do about the locker situation.
Well, we can still, right, we can, so as it exists right now, what we have, regardless of what the understanding was coming out of committee, what we have is the requirement of the policy would be for individualized secured storage, correct? That's required in the policy.
It's required from, yeah, you gotta, they have to have the opportunity to lock up their stuff in a place that is accessible to them.
So.
It's not, it's never been group storage.
We can still vote on it today with further discussion with regard to that, whether we're going to approve it or not. We can have additional discussion if that's not what the policy committee, you feel the policy committee approved. So we would just have further discussion on that.
It wasn't at all what we
with
were
the
told, but
with the exception of the storage question.
okay.
Is the policy committee making a recommendation?
Just a sign.
With the exception of that, right?
And what would that recommendation be?
On the lockers?
No. With the exception of the storage situation, is the policy committee making a recommendation with regard to this policy?
I don't think we can because that was not.
Okay. All right. Then let's have further discussion with regard to the storage policy.
Okay, I think that
what's the question?
Okay, well, it's under, it's on page 5, under 11, lockable storage for participants' personal belongings. That's a requirement in the CRF, but that's basically, I think that Commissioner Thompson's objection to that was that she was worried that it was like an unfunded mandate. Is that correct? You're not against the fact that the individuals have the right to have their stuff locked up if they so choose to do so. You're worried that the expense on the program would be so overwhelming that it's an unfunded mandate, right? Isn't that?
Yeah.
That's what you brought up. So the wording here, lockable storage for participants' personal belongings, it doesn't get into how you do that. But it does need to be their place to lock it up. So I guess, if I read that, I would think they get to have their own little locker. I don't think that they're putting this in a big cooler and everybody's putting a lock on it. Because the staff has lockable storage for their like purse and things like that too, if they so choose.
How much lockers are, do you?
Oh, but I just walked into a program in the Low State and everybody already had them. They were just part of the building.
How many people in the audience that run day programs have lockers already, individual lockers?
Do y'all have places for folks to lock up their stuff if they want it?
Think 2 hands raised.
Do,
3.
do, yeah, you do. Jerry, do you have lockable places? Jerry has it already? Okay, because this has been around for a while. They just formalized it in that, because apparently people don't in some places. I think you paid a few $100s to have the lockers put in.
So my question is, there's,
Just,
I would
yes,
say
sir.
I'm not sure there's anything that says it has to be individualized. I'm not sure that it can't be like at a hotel where you check your stuff in, give it a number.
So it just has to be the opportunity to lock stuff up and have it safe.
Have their personal stuff locked up.
That's all it says. I don't think it gets into
exactly.
how you have to do it. I think, and your concern wasn't whether it was a group or individual, your concern was we putting a financial burden on providers, if I recall from that discussion, Lori, that there was a unfunded mandate is the term you used.
But I would,
I'm not sure they're gonna have a lot of extra money sitting around after this case management EI mess. So now we're gonna have them all go buy lockers. I just think that's a bit much. So now are we going backwards and saying that they can lock it up in one place and it doesn't have to be individual?
but it doesn't say it needs to be individual.
It just says lockable storage.
I agree with Ralph's interpretation.
Put in a closet.
I mean, it does say that we're talking about affording adequate space for privacy, so you might think toward individualized, but if you read the actual language, it just says lockable storage for participants' personal belongings. So,
I'm just going by what we've done in the past and where I've walked into day programs, and what I see is your typical gym lockers, the small little square lockers. I see them everywhere. So, but you can put it in a closet, I guess, and lock it up, as long as the person has the key to be able to get to their stuff. So the easier way would be to have individual locking,
but the question I have is, there's a reference to CFR in there.
Yeah,
To it. Is there anything?
It just said, that's what the language
That's what it
is,
says.
lockable
Right.
storage.
So in the absence of having something specific that says lockable storage, you have that guidance that it has to be secured and locked. It actually doesn't say that the individual has to have a key. It says that the individual has to have access to it.
To get in there.
Right.
Yeah, they have to be able to get into it.
Right.
It's their stuff.
Right.
That doesn't mean a key, Gary, you're right.
Right.
And because a staff person could lock something in an area, which would be easy to do, wouldn't cost anybody any money, and I think that's what Lori and I agreed to do.
I think you agreed to this language, lockable storage
Right.
for participants' personal stuff.
And then the only other issue is there any need in the guidance section to put anything additional in there beyond what's in the CFR? I typically, if the federal regulations say we have to have this, we put that in there, and we don't. The trouble with putting something down in writing of that nature to specify that is that it creates more issues, in my opinion, long-term, as opposed to just allowing a common sense interpretation of what that is, which would include lockers, which would
We
include.
don't want a lion coming and citing somebody.
Right.
So we have no choice but to spell it out, because they will.
Well, that is spelled out. I'm just
It is
saying-
spelled out.
Yeah, I think it is spelled out.
Well, apparently not, because we had two different interpretations of it 10 minutes ago.
I don't think we really discussed one or the other. I think that's why you don't recall it. Neither do I. We just talked about lockers because that's the typical stuff that most day programs have. So we just discussed what was already out there.
but this is not saying, I want to make sure I'm clear, this is not saying that that a entity has to go and procure lockers if they don't have
It just
it.
says it has to have space. They can have a desk that, it says lockable. So wherever the stuff goes, it's got to be locked. It's just to be protected because it's their stuff. That's basically the bottom line.
The federal regulation cited there just indicates that it must ensure an individual's rights of privacy, dignity, and respect, and freedom from coercion and restraint.
Right.
Well, we can try it and see how many people get cited the first year. Because out of this discussion, we've had a lot of interpretations, but if we leave the language the way it is and leave it up to interpretation, I'm willing to try that.
Right. Okay.
I think we need to. We need to give people choices, and if they figure out a way to get stuff locked up for folks, then
And I think
it's
we
up
need
to them.
to follow up and get feedback back if it's causing an issue. And I think that's what we look at in this particular situation.
So the committee can recommend that.
Okay, so since we have had some additional discussion on that, Vicki, I'm gonna actually treat that as a motion to approve the policy as presented, since there was
Okay.
some question. So do we have a second to
Second.
approve the policy? Commissioner Unum. Any further discussion of the policy as presented? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please indicate by saying nay. Hearing none, that policy is approved. Anything further from the policy committee?
Yes, we, began discussions concerning residential rehabilitation standards also. Most of the discussion centered around final rule requirements. The committee asked for references in the final rule which we received, and also for information on how other states are meeting the standards, which we have not received yet. So I feel like we need a little more information that we requested before the committee can look at these standards again. I'm having a hard time finding common sense running throughout these standards, because the residential standards say that a consumer has choice to bring in a partner into their locked bedroom, day or night, whatever, eat anything they want, run the risk of Lord only knows what. But the day program standards say that the person can't use a UDL-approved extension cord because we're concerned about their safety. So we are all over the board with these final rule standards, and a lot of states have had a lot of difficulty with these. And Broughton was telling me about a state. But anyway, I would like to see how they're handling this, because here's what I think is going to have to happen. The wording has to be changed so that providers can consider past history other than having consumers just put at risk and fail. Because right now it looks like it's saying until it is determined that they can't, until they demonstrate that they don't have the ability to make that choice. And some of them have already demonstrated, that ability in the past. And so I think we need to tweak the wording that gives us an opportunity. And I understand that the HAB committees can meet, and that, my concern with all these final rule standards and all the documentation you're going to have in place so that people aren't put at risk, it's going to create the need for, just a lot of paperwork. That in and of itself is going to be difficult. Not to get it started on the possible misinterpretation of what these things can mean. So I just think there's some risk to these things. We want to make sure we get it right. We don't want to make mistakes that other states have made. And we just want to try to make sure that if somebody is not capable of making that choice, we don't say, well, final rule says they can do this, final rule says they can do that. This has got to be really, really looked over. It's our job to set the standards with DDSN, and we're going to have to set them. And, to me, it's more risky to do some of the things that they're asking us to do than it is just a flat out not do them. Because people, if you say that somebody can, for example, if you're in the ID program and your IQ is 70 or below, then you've got the equivalent age of maybe 11. In South Carolina, to consent to sex, you're supposed to be 17. 16 if your partner is 18 or less. I think that's right. But, here we are with all of this choices, and I understand the reason for it, and I understand that people don't need to be discriminated against. But when we're talking about all these freedoms, the question that has to go through our mind is, are they capable of accepting the same responsibility that comes along with making them? So we are not ready to make a recommendation today on residential HAB standards, but we have begun the process of looking at them. I would like for us to open that back up and get any public comment. If you want to send in comments, go on and send it. We want to hear what you have to say.
With regard to what you were requesting from the information you said you had received was information on how other states have handled this. Is that correct, Vicki?
Yes. I would like to see what their wording is in their standards and guidelines in regard to the visitor thing, for example, for one thing.
So the inquiry to staff as far as the ability to obtain that particular information, is that something that's out there?
Well, you can go to CMS's website and pull up the transition plans from all the other states. That's all available out there. As far as how they're treating it in their standards, like for residential guidelines, since all residential programs are not created equal across the country, that gets to be very difficult to do. We can give it a shot, but you know, just as I don't want to get into a philosophical debate on this right now, but I would suggest we do this, however. I would suggest that when we're meeting with the executive directors after this meeting, and one of the items on my agenda is let's look at the work groups that we have. You know, and I know they say, folks, we didn't have any input, we didn't have the opportunity to ask questions. We've been meeting as work groups on all these projects since January for case management and EI. But we can also go ahead and add a work group to review the residential HAB standards and get the residential directors in here. So we have clear-cut guidance for Alliant, because they are supposed to cite what we tell them to cite. It's not like they're out there doing this on their own, because I really want to take a real careful look at protecting our individuals' rights. And we can't, the adage of, well, because they have an IQ of this, that means their age is this, is just not what you do. That is not how you talk about because I would never say that about our children. I think that we need to look at what they can and cannot do through assessments and then decide, you know, and yes, past history is always part of assessment. That's what you use. That's what you do. But I think that I would like to get the whole provider network into the game of walking through those so we can talk about what is reasonable and what isn't reasonable. So if that's okay.
What sort of time frame do you feel like that's?
Well, we know these are our standards. We got to get moving on them. So I would like to see that over the next month. We already have a quality assurance group that is going to look at all of the indicators starting in September, but we can put together a group of like residential directors and executive directors who want to be in there to start looking at these particular standards and come up with comments and guidance for the policy committee, because they live and breathe it every day. So I think that let's let them be in part of that process. I really don't have any heartburn over the standards the way they are, but I think that let's get the other input. It's fine with me. And if that's the model we want to go forward with working on things, I think that's a good one to use.
Well, in the case of these standards, I think it is, because they're the ones that are going to be, you know, it doesn't matter what I think about somebody's ability or IQ, and the bottom line is it's going to be a judge that's going to make that determination. So, you know, they're going to look at all these things. If we allow people to be put in harm's way or to put themselves in harm's way, regardless of what somebody who doesn't have any experience in Washington decided that we need to be doing in the way of choice. So I really like the idea of the provider work session and work group, and I think that would weigh heavily on any decision that we would make. But the way they're worded right now, and by the way, there's nothing in the stuff that we were sent that said anything about a fence in a residential facility. So that is an HHS state South Carolina thing that I just don't agree with. But here's the thing, I just think we have to make sure that as we move forward, that, you know, if I were a provider in this environment with the way these things are worded now, I would retire, because I think it's really dangerous to be one and then have to go by all this. It's scary, it's very scary to me, but if a provider group can really look at that wording carefully and they feel comfortable with it, then I could get comfortable with it. I'm not at all the way it is right now. And that would be helpful, Mary. That's an excellent idea, because it's not something that I don't think we as commissioners understand well enough to make it anyway. And that's not a cop-out. It's just we don't. But I also would still like to know what some other states are doing.
So it feels to me like there's sort of a three-part thing going forward before the next policy committee meeting. We're talking about potentially reopening it for public comment, bringing in the work group that Mary suggested, and then trying to see what we can find by way of other states' approach to setting these standards. Is that the consensus at this point in time? So what I would propose at this point in time is that we have a motion with regard to because the standards themselves are not up for a vote. But what we would be doing is basically saying, as far as going forward with this information before the next policy committee meeting, would be to obtain the feedback from the work group, have staff attempt to obtain via other state standards, and to reopen this for public comment.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Sandra, do we have you got that down? What we're looking for? Any additional discussion from staff or any of the commission members with regard to that?
I'd just like to make a comment that as staff or whomever researches other states, I'd love for them to not come back with Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee. I'd like to look beyond our region to see what some other states that treat people with disabilities better are doing.
Any further questions or comments? So we have the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Lori seconded.
Thank you. Did you already second?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. My apologies. That's right. Lori did second. So without further discussion, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Any further business from the policy committee?
That's all.
Okay, thank you. Now, as I said earlier, we'll be going on to old business. The first item up is Susan on case management update.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Moving up to July 1st, a lot of work was done in the system, and I want to just acknowledge all the providers who spent a lot of time thinking about waiver case management, gearing up their staff, receiving a lot of technical assistance, either from their peers or from DDSN staff. We continue to have open communication and a lot of dedication to the effort, so thank you to all. Just as a reminder, these are my slides that I present pretty much every month, but just a quick flyby. The reasoning we're talking about waiver case management being a good thing as a service description is because it really does increase required contacts with case managers. Case management as a purpose helps with referral, linkage, assessment, and planning for services. And I think families would agree that's a good service. Service providers feel like it's very necessary. And so it's a positive thing to increase the communication and the structure of those interactions. So that's where we're coming from when we say that.
Waiver case management is different than targeted Medicaid case management.
Yes.
Two different services.
Yes, they are different. They have different standards, we have different manuals, we have different requirements because one is for people outside of the waiver and one is for people in waiver services. So they're different due process requirements and contact requirements. So thank you last month for approving those standards. As we reflected, we had planned and have now conducted 7 waiver case management trainings. Because of the volume at Rich Lex, we did one kind of as our launch, one training just for them, and then moved on to our regional locations as well as through Skype. And then we also recorded and have posted one of those trainings. And, you know, just as some feedback that we're getting, you know, case managers are asking some questions just because once you're doing it, it brings about more questions. So they're receiving a lot of feedback. We're very timely in our response on that. And folks are learning how to meet those requirements, certainly. So that has definitely moved forward. And just a reminder, you know, how we got to where we're getting, or where we are now. DHHS used a formal rate setting methodology with a lot of input from providers to get to that rate. And that was many, many years ago, as Mary said repeatedly through her reports. So that was a methodical process. And we've done a lot of updates on that on a monthly basis. In your binder, there's our monthly memo that we send out. with some analysis of how providers are viewing. And on that, what you'll see when you look at it is that 75% of DDSN waiver consumers are with providers that are billing at over 54% of what was their current payment. And again, this is we're July now, so we're looking at June data. And 1 year ago, only 12% of those waiver consumers were with providers billing at over 54%. So as I started out, a lot of efforts have been made. There's been a lot of visibility, continued discussion and effort. So providers have made a lot of progress, although we know there are still a number of risks in place. Next month, I think, when we see this July data analyzed, we'll be able to talk about that even more. It'll be even more relevant based on the new implementation. So to support this big transition, technical assistance was of course offered. We looked at the 17 providers that were performing initially at less than 50% of billing efficiency and went on site, did those technical assistance reviews and feedback and training. And then additionally, just as case management training requests have come in system-wide in fiscal year 2019, we did that with 28 providers. So a large amount of providers have received a large amount of technical assistance. And just as a summary, we've reported in past months that DSN Advocates terminated their contract. That was a very small private provider. Fairfield DSN Board transition had also stopped case management. They had a very small caseload and employees at retirement age. So that happened. Retirement, I should say, career phase, not age. But we're still transitioning. We got about 18 active cases left for Fairfield. The new announcement we received in the last couple of weeks was for Colleton, that they'll be terminating their case management contract effective 8/31. So we're following our process to transition those cases. They have about 124 cases, and they're doing a provider choice fair in August. So that families can learn about other provider choices for case management. And then as we updated last month, just on a positive note, Darlington has actually kind of taken the bull by the horns and decided to add more case managers to respond to the increased contact demands and then also the caseloads that they have. So really reconfiguring their model to be more adaptive.
Are there other provider choices in Colleton?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Serve Colleton, yes. Yes. Lastly, in my update, certainly willing to take questions on other topics, we wanted to make sure it was clear that we have developed invoices for all types of case management invoices, meaning with this new retrospective payment system, we've got specific invoicing that's being done. Each invoice reflects a breakdown of billing errors. So if any of the billing that was submitted sends back an error, they'll have a specific report about that. And it includes some information about Medicaid ineligibles. Obviously, we will have an issue if folks are not maintaining their Medicaid eligibility. So we wanted to make that even more transparent. If that Medicaid eligibility lapse, bringing it to their attention, it's right there in a reporting format. So as far as the June data, we've taken that on with DDSN staff, analyzing that data for providers, figuring out what the issues are and contacting them directly to make sure that they know what they need to remediate. In July, we're going to also analyze that. In August, we'll analyze the July data, and we'll also be developing clear procedures for providers to start taking on that analysis themselves. So instead of just saying, kind of use a report, we're going to actually go through. When you see this, then look here. Do this after you get this kind of information.
So basically, we pulled the reports, I saw them yesterday, that Lori Manus is already starting to mitigate some of if she saw them fall out of the June report, like the Medicaid number was wrong, or they need to get some documentation in to get back into Medicaid. She's already seeing that and correcting it.
Yes. Yes, so we're actively taking that on, and we felt like that was a supportive role that we wanted to take first, not only to make sure that we fully understood the best way to explain and support providers in using this data, but to give them a leg up by doing it for them at first.
And we anticipate one of the biggest errors being using the wrong template. within the computer system, there's a template for targeted case management and there's one for waiver case management. We think that if there's going to be a big error, it is going to be, oh my gosh, I put the note in the wrong template. That can be corrected and rebuilt. But you don't want to go through that effort. So we would really like people to, I don't know, put sticky notes on your computers, say use the right template, make your screensaver saying use the right template, because there's no way to block out one template or the other. So they're going to have to remember to use the proper thing. It's like when we had a backing out issue before the age of cameras in the back of your van, we would stick something close to the rearview mirror that says, the tree's still there, look behind you, you know, kind of thing. It's like, you got to remember to do this until they start getting used to the fact that you've got two different types of case management at this point. Sorry.
Sure, yeah, and I think that's part of just.
It's getting used to the new service.
Kind of executive functioning about how to take on a new task and what your checking mechanisms are for that. So definitely having a checklist to make sure you're doing it. Good idea. So that concludes what I've prepared to update on for waiver case management. Glad to take any questions, go over any of that.
Has there been any additional communication with HHS regarding last time we were talking about trying to expand what falls under appropriate billables? There was some talk of travel. Has there been any further with them to increase the pool?
I think that until we have some data, we have encouraged providers to please collect your travel time. If it exceeds what's in that rate, we would go ahead and ask them to revisit that. We have also, they are still working on the 2% salary increase that was given. They said they're taking under advisement. They're consulting with the General Assembly now. I guess
they're being HHS
will be talking to the General Assembly to see what their intent for that was to be. I mean, I did it. I got my viewpoint of it. Now they're going over to do it. So, but we still, because we haven't gotten the money yet. So we can't pass through anything till we actually get the money. So there's a little bit of time to keep working on that. But we did have an issue come up where a provider said it wasn't transportation, it was documentation, that you have to document time and it's taking, that's not billable. But I think we also have, for some folks, there was a fundamental misunderstanding as to what documentation actually was. So I think we kind of helped them understand that when you're actually putting your plan in TheraP, because it's, you got to be thinking through that. That's what we pay case management to do. That's not documentation, that's plan formulation. And that is a billable service. So that's what we were working on. But we're just, as the questions come up, we're taking them, and we're constant, you know, if there's questions, bring them on. We want to answer them. We want to, if there's something that we didn't know that we have to discover, let's figure it out. But that's what we're doing now. I mean, we're just mopping up the last, but I haven't gotten any other communications, you know, until someone stands in here and says something, but I was not given that notification prior to say, you know, and as we get questions about technical issues, Lori's putting those into you know, frequently asked question type of module to be sending out to people too. Because I would imagine if one person has an issue with it, somebody else is thinking it, and we might as well get it out to everybody. But the case management group is still meeting, if they choose to. You know, I would encourage people to engage in these groups. They're not closed. Not a closed group. Okay, sorry.
Gary, I have a question here. Do y'all have the billing report in front of you for June? I just pulled it off the internet because it wasn't sent to me. I had asked for the report to be sent on the billing with the actual dollars attached to it. I didn't get that.
We have the normal billing, the normal report. Yeah, we have the normal report, and yeah, yeah, we have the normal report, the billing report.
And so the numbers I'm looking at from the internet show 60.4% in June.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we're going backwards.
Well, yeah, you can say that, but you can also look at I think that needs to have a nice big little notation next to it saying that how many trainings and how many people were in training, 2-day trainings for person-centered thinking and technical assistance training for actually doing waiver. So yeah, we knew And I think we mentioned that we would see a dip in June because we know how much training we actually did. Yes, ma'am. It went down, but there is a really good reason for it.
It went down from 69 to 60, and are these still those weighted percentages? That we came up with that weighted situation?
Pat, you want to answer that, please?
I'm not looking at the document, but the difference between the weighted average and the simple average is infinitesimal.
I didn't hear that, I'm sorry.
He can't.
The answer is yes, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
the difference isn't statistically significant is what the answer was.
The
Difference between,
weighted numbers, okay, so they are the weighted numbers. And we went 63, then went 69, and then went back to 60. So we're back really where we were in March. So,
Did you hear my explanation as to why we went back?
actual dollar amount in it, and that they would have lost or that they would have made if they had been billing, under the new system.
Okay, they didn't lose any money in June because it was still prospective by case monthly payment. And that's why we made sure all the training that was necessary to launch this was done prior to July 1.
I remember that you said that you were going to do 60% in July, August, and September, isn't that right?
That's safety net.
That's the safety net program, yeah, we're doing a prospective 60% payment.
For targeted case management?
For waiver case management.
Waiver case management, okay, so that's what we're looking at on the billing report.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so July, August, and September, they get that 60%, is that right?
Yes, ma'am, but the plan is for them to earn significantly more than that.
So what happens in October?
Let's see what happens in July, September, and, July, August, and September. Let's watch the trends.
So I've heard a lot of reasons why this might be, and the only one I didn't hear is it's possible that, that we are in the middle of summer and vacations and stuff too, so that is definitely possible. But, it also could be that we've heard we can't sustain this, because you have so many face-to-face with meetings with the families, and you can't have a face-to-face every month just because you want to build that or you need to build that. And I think that's the thing that has to be factored in. If you're going to have a quarterly face-to-face, then, and those aren't in any way spread out. There's just a whole lot of things here that are unknown. We don't really know why it goes up and it goes down the way it does. We're guessing. So, this is a very critical situation. I don't think I'm asking for too much to ask for the actual dollar amount. I don't want a weighted percentage. That doesn't mean anything to me. I don't want that whole estimated thing. I want to know what the dollar amount would be. Can I get that?
We can get it within an hour.
Thank you.
all right, is there anybody else from the commission that wants to have the actual amount opposed to the percentages? So, obviously this is something that we're hyper aware of at this point in time. And I think the answer to your question is what happens in October is one that we've got to see what actually happens. We've got the floor built in right now at the 60% level. It's not ideal, but it is a floor. And we're gonna have to see. But it's gonna be ongoing. I agree that we can't just base it off just the first 3 months. We're gonna have to keep an eye on this long term to make sure that we're setting up a system that's viable one way or another.
It's being watched,
by everybody.
like a hawk. It is just, I don't know what else to say. We're working the plan. We have the plan. We've been working it since October. So.
Certainly issues about having to pay money back to DHHS were brought up earlier.
This is another one of those liability issues.
This is another vulnerability.
That was made public. Yeah, it's a liability issue.
We have a responsibility to try to balance out these two things. We're trying to make sure that the service is provided, that the people are getting what they need, but we're also having to face the reality of we have responsibility to other agencies that could come and take money from us. And totally understanding the stress that this is causing. What we're trying to do up here is find that balance. We're working hard to do it. That's what I would say.
On what basis can they come and take money from us?
If we are not charging the proper way and are overpaying, they can come back and say that money wasn't justified and we want it back. It's basically when we pay out more than we're supposed to, or we pay out in a manner that we're not supposed to, HHS can say, or I guess or does it come from CMS?
It's CMS.
It comes from CMS. Comes and says, none of those expenditures were approved and the federal government's gonna come back and swoop that money.
It was because that spa that was submitted a long time, when we talk, like again, we've been talking about this waiver of case management and the rate change to the 15-minute unit and the step down since 2014. It was supposed to be completed in July of 2015. So when we got notice that the spa was approved, and they say, we're going to take you at your word, and you said this was your step down program, we just never got off that 75-25 split. So everything between that time that it was supposed to be at the market rate and until we finally get there is potential liability, and it builds every day.
Any further questions?
You know, Gary, I just want to say this real quick. That relationship works both ways, though. You know, in other words, yes, if we overbill, I mean, I do cost reports all the time, and if we overbill, then we're gonna, you know, or if we're overpaid, we're gonna pay back. But if they don't give us enough money to operate reasonably and safely a program, then we can't operate it.
Right.
And we can't have those providers out there robbing from Peter to pay Paul and trying to take money out of day program money to fund ICF or to fund EI or to fund case management. I know Susan's getting ready to do a report on EI. Let me just say that I did attend July 12th, that webinar. And they said, because it speaks to your point, Gary, they said they weren't going to discuss the preparation, the billing for preparation. Let me just say, on July 1st, these providers were told on July 9th that effective July 1st, billing was going to change for the BabyNet program, and it's going to go to this Bridges thing. So, and this is for the 0 to 3-year-olds. I don't know if it's true for both intervention programs or not, but it is the rule of HHS. They were told on July 9th that the billing terms changed, effective July 1st. They can't go back and change what they did or how they spent their time or how they billed July 1st on July 9th. So on July 12th, I watched that webinar and they said, well, you know, we haven't got the guidelines written for the prep yet, but we'll keep you informed as to what our decisions are. The providers had to be ready July 1st. Got to be ready. And HHS doesn't even have the guidelines written. So this does need to be a reasonable business partnership between all of us. You know, and I'll stop talking and let Susan do the report. I would like to know what our responsibility is for that program, if any.
Susan? Well, actually, Rufus is going to give you.
Okay.
And so on that note, Vicki, having made that transition for us, we'll go ahead to the next item on the agenda, which is Bruce's Sky update.
It's a nice segue. We had a conference call this morning with Health and Human Services regarding the 2 webinars, and I participated in the webinar on the 12th as well. And there was a comment that we're not addressing prep time. Prep time in and of itself is not a reportable activity. However, it's a practice that accompanies reportable activity. So that's just a point of clarification. But as of today, Health and Human Services will release a frequently asked questions with answers and also indicate in writing to continue practices as you have until further notice. And so they recognize that maybe the comments regarding prep time were premature. And so we got that from pretty high level Health and Human Services official this morning. So that's late breaking news that should quell some of the consternation that we've been fielding, you know, for the past few weeks. Personally, I want to recognize Joyce Kimry, who's our program manager for early intervention. She has been just a rock for the early intervention providers in terms of hosting counterpart meetings with supervisors. I've tried to piggyback on a couple of the meetings with her, and I've just been impressed with the turnout. So I thank EI providers for taking time out of their busy schedules to come and share information with her. And everything that she receives from providers that affects or has the potential to impact operations, we have promptly shared that information with Health and Human Services. About 3 weeks ago, I believe it was 3 weeks ago, we asked Health and Human Services, because we started hearing some of the noise in the system, that things weren't occurring as planned. There were some major challenges with the Bridges integration, which is Health and Human Services electronic records system and billing system. It was supposed to tie into the Medicaid information system, or MMIS. There have been some delays with that. However, we were assured June 27th on a conference call that myself, Pat, Mary, Chris, Joyce, and some officials at Health and Human Services that, hey, we're going to make this work. We're moving forward with the July 1 implementation date to transfer BabyNet, which is early intervention services to children under the age of 3, to Health and Human Services. And that was for Health and Human Services to fulfill a legislative mandate. So this is a couple years in the making, but again, as of the day, hopefully the frequently asked questions will have a lot of answers to those questions, and again, some documentation in writing that we're going to stand down on the issue of prep time and continue to perform as you have in the past. Okay.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Yes, ma'am.
But also that, you know, all this was not, that they didn't know, the idea of having to do your notes in Bridges, we've been talking about that for months and months. That is not something that was just sent out July 9. Bridges, unfortunately, as all EIs know, and all EIs have complained about for the last how many years, is not a very good system. It's one guy made it. Some reason First Steps and one person bought the system, the whole system, how to use it. It is flawed. We all know that. So integration has been difficult because of not because of their MMIS system, but because of Bridges itself. There is more turmoil in the OT, PT, and speech world because they're not used to utilizing that system, and they're the ones that are having more of the problem. And communication to them has been poor, but they're stepping that up. They're doing the weekly webinars, they're doing the frequently asked questions, they're trying to make sure. But the one issue that everybody needs to know, payment, the way to get paid has been, they've done a workaround, and they've actually kind of got like a clearinghouse, Medicaid, where people bill outside, they send the information back to HHS, so the payment piece is there.
Yep, and as a point of clarification, there won't be weekly webinars, but there'll be weekly bulletins.
Oh, sorry, bulletins, gosh, bad me.
Human Services, and again, we're going to
I
continue.
need to make another comment, respond to what Mary said, because I think she was pointing entirely.
Oh,
The
sorry.
thing is that we got to be good partners, and our job on the commission is to make sure that people aren't scared to death because they're told after the fact that, oh, you should have been doing something different. And they're told things like on July 9th that you're not going to be able to bill for prep anymore, which is going to cost thousands of dollars if you can't bill that. So all this was unnecessary. You know, and everybody needs to be ready, and we need to make sure that everybody's ready. And to what extent we need to get involved in that as a commission, I don't know. But this is kind of ridiculous, the way we're trying to, we need to be good business partners, and so today, but we are missing the boat, and every time we turn around, I sure hope the whole next year isn't going to be like this, to where they're saying one thing and we're responsible for something else. And this is not about integration of Bridges. This is about where they're not going to bill for prep time, which they've been doing forever. So, you know, let's just make sure that you're getting my point here. This is not something you can minimize. The relationship between all of us, that, you know, these things need to be taken into consideration. I understand they took BabyNet. I get that. Still don't know what our responsibility towards it is, but You know, maybe I'll find out now.
We will get a definition for prep time, because it's a semantics issue. They're gonna still be able to pay for most of the stuff they're doing.
And
So,
the point being, Vicki, though, it wasn't us that said you couldn't bill for prep, it was
and they said
Yes,
it,
that
they
said
said it in public meetings. Josh Baker said it in public meetings months ago.
Well, and regardless of when it was said, they said it, not us.
That's right.
And then we can respond to that, but this is the ongoing problem. I mean, they're gonna dictate certain things because they have the power to dictate them, and Josh has the power to do it, and therefore he does it, right?
And we also got to make sure the system, because those EIs are our EIs, because we take over at age 3, so it's the same person. I think one of the issues is we got to make sure we have one manual versus 2 manuals, because that causes a lot of confusion as far as what the words mean. If you use different, words in one manual and not in the other, we have to make sure we've integrated that properly. That's part of that is on us.
I'll just add 2 points in closing that from our experiences, Health and Human Services has been receptive to the feedback that we share on behalf of providers, and have responded or tried to respond when they had answers. It's been a frustrating process for them as well. And the other point, which is most important, just through our conversations personally, even as recent as yesterday, Joyce and I had a conference call with a provider of EI services, and you could just hear the anxiety in their voices. And, they were very, very grateful to say that, hey, we're glad we have a conduit, even though we realize that you guys don't own the process, but you're at least available to hear our comments and relay them, and we'll pick up the phone. But I would just say that and I've been traveling a lot to meet some of the EIs, and I've met a lot of nice people, nice providers. These folks have integrity, and they want to do a good job. And so all they want is clarity in the communications, and so they don't want to do anything wrong or be perceived as out here committing fraud. So I will say that from my experiences, these folks have a lot of integrity. So I really do appreciate what they do day in and day out, for the children with special needs in our system. But thank you.
Thanks, Rufus. All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda, Chris Clark for a follow-up to the community contracts.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So when we presented the community contracts last month, I had been here like a week or a half at that point, and were a great many questions that were asked that I couldn't answer. And so I immediately followed up with all the commission members the next day by email with the answers to those questions you had. But we want to make sure we close that out in a public setting and, express those answers here so that everyone can hear them. First thing I'd like to say is we're going to be revisiting our whole process about how we present that information to y'all next year. I would like to have explanations for variances right there on the document, so that anything that's significant and doesn't make any sense, you have that right in front of you, and then hopefully mitigate some of the questions. The problem is we were scrambling to get that together because we were late getting started. They were waiting on me to get here. And so there were some nuances there that between the way it was done in the past and the way we did it this year. The process is extremely manual, so I appreciate everything that my staff did to get these numbers together. But basically there were 4 questions. First one was related to case management and why it appeared that we went down almost a little over 1,000 cases. Well, the issue is in 19, the stats that were provided included state funding case management folks of 494 and 838 with the 2 different funding systems there. We actually had a tick up of 331 folks in the waiver case management. So that those netted out to a negative 1,001 slots or folks. And so had we done it consistently, which we're going to push for that obviously next year, that wouldn't have shown that drop. I did not get the numbers of the state and target case management folks for 2020 though, but I did explain the variance between those 2 numbers for the 2 years. Number 2 question related to family support numbers and why the number of people served there was down as well. In 2019, we have a pot of $1,450,000 that we allocate out in family support funds throughout the state. Part of that is retained here at central office as a state pool that we allocate with QPLs. There were an estimated 2,127 consumers impacted by those funds, and those numbers were left out of our 2020 numbers, but they were in 2019. Again, we'll ensure that we address these issues going forward. The third question related to community options, and why I guess it didn't make sense, the number of persons served versus the cost. It just didn't make sense logically. There were some new folks, 2 new people added to their service compared to prior year, and one of them was at a band H, which attributed to the distortion. You looked at the average per consumer numbers. Fourth question related to why was there a day service add-on for SC Mentor? Well, as long as I've been in the system, there is so much I still don't know that I'm learning every day about what DDSN does. I didn't even know this thing existed, but basically some of the QPL rates exclude day services. And so if a consumer served in those settings desires to go to a day program, we have a day service add-on. And so with Mentor, they're one of the ones where their base rate does not include day program. And if we identify folks that they're serving, they want to go to the day program, and we add funds for that. And it's called a day service add-on. It is paid based on actual attendance, based on remitted documents to finance to pay for that. Once I distributed that information, there was another question that was posed by one of the commissioners. It was asking about Mentor's day program variance. Again, there's some consistency issues here. In 2019, they had served 4 folks, but they had only, finance had only estimated 130 days of service needed from the year. Whereas this year, they budgeted or put in the initial contracts an estimate of 260 days. So that doubled the dollar amount for those 4 people. In addition, there were 2 new folks that were served in 2020 that were not served in 2019. So hopefully those are clear answers.
Why did they double it? That's where the number came from.
Some of what we want to do, typically in finance, we want to be conservative. You want to look at worst case scenario. If we budget services at a lower level and then it exceeds it, then we're surprised, not in a good way. So we want to build in fault tolerance in our numbers so that, you know, if they do attend more than 130 days average, that we've got those numbers already set aside, that amount set aside. We can then revisit our available funds later in the year and reallocate resources, you know, if we see that they're trending lower than expected.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does that answer the questions? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Chris. All right, moving on to new business. The first will be a presentation training on paper.
One question. I noticed in tab 5, there was an administrative cost recommendation. Do we need to vote on that, or?
No, that's going to be.
We're not on that. We're one ahead of that. We're still on the training section. We'll get to it. Thank you.
Making sure.
Yep, thank you. Yes.
Okay. You know, as a trainer, it's really hard to stand facing a few in the room and everybody else is behind you, so I don't know. I may stand sideways if that's okay. With everybody, there's going to be some strange things going on in the next few minutes. Don't be alarmed. It will all be explained, I promise. While the strange things are happening, I'll introduce myself. I'm Michelle Schaefer. I'm the Executive Director of Max Abilities of York County. So greetings from Rock Hill and York and all those fine cities. I have been in this field for 34 years. I started when I was 12. And I started as an ESP at the Greer Community Residence in Greer, South Carolina. So shout out to Thrive Upstate. That's where my career started. I was just going to do it because I did it in college. It was a lot of fun until I felt mature enough to teach school. I don't know what it says about me, but I still am. What I wanted to talk to you all about today was one of the other hot topics I think that has been discussed, which is the final rule. And that is something that has been on the thoughts and the hearts of a lot of us in this room. And I don't know about the rest of my peers. I just speak for myself and for the staff in at Max Abilities, but there's been a lot of frustration. A lot of my frustration came from, well, we're already doing this. Why are we talking about this? Why do I have to go to 50 meetings to do what we're already doing? And then I had to check the ego and step back and say, okay, well, it's here. How do we do it better? What are we missing? What are the things that we need to think about to make sure that the services and supports that we provide are the best that they can be, and that they're always centered on the folks that we're here to support. So there was a lot of soul searching that went, as we were going through this process, hearing the talk, not agreeing with most of it, but moving forward because that's what the expectation is. So as we got to CAP plan development, anybody in here enjoyed that? CAP plan. Yeah, that was a lot of Saturday and Sundays, a lot of prayers. But as we started to develop that plan, some universal truths became evident to us as far as how do we move forward with the development and the implementation of that plan. And I'm sure there's some similarities and some differences that we all have on that. But one thing we knew is that we couldn't be paper oriented because we were drowning in paper. Too much paper. And paper never solved anything, in my opinion, because we're in the people business. So our paperwork was focused on the plan and how do we make that as individualized as we can for each person. If there are things that are historical safety concerns, how do we build in human rights reviews and, supported restrictions for those folks until they can learn a better way or a safer way to manage. And if they can't, that those things are monitored and discussed. But one thing we also felt was we needed more input. So we started committees. We started a Consumer Advisory Committee. We started a Staff Advisory Committee because that's a big piece of it. And we started a Family Advisory Committee just to get input on where are we hitting the mark, where are we missing the mark, what could we tweak, how do we come across, just a lot of different things that aren't very comfortable, but probably necessary to develop a good plan. And those have been going on for about a year now, and they really have been remarkably positive. And one thing we have gotten from families is, hey, we think you guys are doing a really good job. Thank you. And we started off with a good premise because we had a really great core group of staff members that have their hearts in the right place. They want to be here. We have a lot of employees that have longevity, that have been around for 15, 20 years. So we were excited to bring them into the process of plan development. So ours is focused on training, which is why all the weird stuff is going on. And what we found out in that discussion is, while a lot of us have our hearts in the right place, we've kind of gotten into some habits that we need to rethink. That parental versus support mindset. I'm here to help you make a good decision, and you don't always realize how much you interject yourself into someone else's life. So with that thought in mind, we're retooling our training to ask 3 questions. Number 1, why are we here? Why am I as a staff member here? And that's that gut check for each of us. Number 2, who are we here for? Number 3, what are we supposed to be doing while we're here? Again, going back to some of the things that were mentioned earlier, over the course of time, we've been so regulation oriented. Sometimes we just want to make sure we get the box checked. We want to get the piece of paper in place to show we did that thing. And that all pulls away from the core mission of what we're here to do. So how do we get back? How do we get our staff that have been brought on during that time back to where we're just about the business of supporting folks in the way they want to be supported? And talking with some of our consumers, this training course was developed. Their concerns weren't major, they were little. They weren't worried about. And when we asked them, do you want somebody to come into your house and say, no, are you kidding me? How safe is that? No way. Oh, no, that's your job. You're supposed to make sure I'm safe. Don't you dare. But they were a little more concerned about, what they eat, where they go, and how fully we're involving them in that decision-making process. So we have done a few things this morning that I want to talk about. So again, a little off the beaten path here for a commission meeting. We'll go all this. So how did you feel when your seats were all moved around and you weren't asked?
Freaked out.
A little bit. I saw your face and I was like, thank you, Commissioner. Because it said it all. Why? What freaked you out about it?
One, I don't want to be in the chairman's chair. I'm not comfortable with this. I'm accustomed to being over there.
Well, see, I had a reserved seat and I probably sat behind it because I don't want to sit in the front row. It's just against I can't. I didn't. So I was a little non-compliant there. I guess it needs to be implemented. Okay, how about snacks? So you didn't get a snack. What do you think about that?
Not fair.
It's not fair. What is it? You wanted something to eat, and they're all healthy snacks. Did you notice that?
I did.
Obviously, I didn't pick them. They're all healthy. How about those of you who picked, you just got your snack handed to you? Who just got a snack handed to them? You didn't get a choice.
I'm allergic to olives.
Oh, she's allergic to olives and trying to kill them. Who else just got one handed to them? Mike, what'd you think?
I thought it was great, but
Okay.
it was like.
Would you have rather had something else in the basket?
Yeah, probably.
You Ralph.
I'm sorry.
My person made a good choice.
All right. Other than we tried to kill somebody.
Your choice.
Okay, those of you who got like a limited choice, like a choice of between one or two things, did you feel a little bit better about the process at least you got some kind of choice? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Back there in the back. Were these brave enough to shake our head? Yes. How about those of you who got unlimited choices? You could pick anything out of the basket.
Well, I thought I could if she took it from me.
Oh, no! How'd you feel about that?
Yeah, what happened?
Okay, so we all have opinions. We all have opinions about food, right? That's kind of a universal thing. We all, like our space and where we are. And I do this, and it's kind of silly, and I know, but before I go to that, how did you view me for all this ridiculousness? All this, I'm going to give you this, you're not going to get that. What did you think about this whole process? Somebody break, come on.
Well, I didn't know that it was part of your presentation, and now I'm disappointed. That means it's not going to be a regular monthly thing.
Popcorn every time. Okay. Typically in our programs, because we've been doing this and it's been a lot, this is very small. Based on the 3-hour training program we're putting on with our staff. But they've been, I'm not really happy with you right now. I don't like you telling me what I'm going to do. I don't like you making that decision for me. So then the next question then begs, how does this pertain to the folks that we support? Do we do this for them? They feel like sometimes in the name of caregiving. And how can we turn that around to where it feels a little less punitive or arbitrary? Did anybody think that's what came to me was, this is kind of arbitrary. Who we went to, what we did with, it was random. How often are we perceived as making random decisions? Not decisions that are based on a plan, based on a discussion that they're part of. And again, these are all things we know, but we have to come back and revisit each of us. So we developed a training where every single DSP, every single manager, every single finance is coming through, and we're doing it where it's that one-on-one judgment. Who am I? Why am I here? What is my role? And how do I remember how much I'm interjecting myself into the life of someone else? And how do I make sure that there are limits to that? and I interject when it's necessary for safety. And it's been a process that's been discussed. So I just bring to you some of the thought processes that we've had in York as we implement our CAP plan, and we're not finished. Please don't tell the folks that are checking them, Susan, put your fingers in the air. We should have been done by June, but we're still working on that training component because to me and to our staff, we felt that the infusion of the thought process has to go through every single thing we teach. Because we have to get away from, we just do this for compliance. We just do this to get a piece of paper filled out. To, we're doing this for a reason, this is what the reason is. And moving forward, we want to make sure that we're supporting folks in making decisions about their life. Even small decisions, you know the snacks choices that you had? I didn't have candy bars in there. There wasn't horrible choices, but they were all things that would be considered a healthy snack. So even within a limited choice for a person, there are still choices to be had. And it's been well received by our staff. And I think this is the one training, and I've taught classes for as long as I've done this. So I teach people that are younger than I've been doing teaching, which is sad. My birthday was this week, that didn't help either. So, you know, but I've had more people come up and say, you know, that made me think. That's something that we really need to work on. When are we going to do this again? So I felt like the approach actually worked. And so many times in our field and in our work, what is the phrase? Sometimes you get weary in well-doing. We feel that way. But this was kind of a breath of fresh air. They got a kick out of the humor and the games and the activities. And it had the targeted effect, which was, let's think about why we do what we do. And it was a unique opportunity. Because of the CAP plan, probably we wouldn't have done that or thought about it in that way if we hadn't been pushed. But I think it was beneficial. I think it's going to yield rewards. It's something that we're going to do again every quarter, bringing the trainers next time down to our coordinators. And then our goal is to do peer training with these concepts moving forward and incorporating that into our core training. But just to bring everybody on board, it was just something a little different. And I hope that it gives you just a little bit of an idea of the efforts that are going on across the state, as all of us are incorporating and developing and implementing our CAP plans, in addition to the case management, the EI, and all the other things that we're doing. So I thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions?
I do. So what you're saying that this is not a one and done. So you're not just doing this class, it's going into all the training and all the opportunity for training.
Our CAP plan, we feel like if we don't infuse it into the training moving forward for everything, then it's not going to have any impact. And that's based on the fact that that's how we've done it before and it hasn't had any impact. So we had to find a different way.
You know, and I'm going to ask questions because I'm familiar with the process. The unannounced facility checks, have you changed the questions in there?
We did.
Okay.
We actually built a few questions in and we gave the question or the list of questions, the review tool, we've given that to every single employee.
Okay.
As part of the training. Again, just we go out and ask questions now on our unannounced visits and just to prepare them and to get them to think and to get them to learn and to dive in to all the material that they need to know and do the things that they need to do to be effective employees. But we're fortunate. We have a good group and they've been very receptive. So we're pleased about that. But thank you for your time and for your indulgence, and I hope everybody enjoyed your snack.
And the ones who didn't get any. I didn't get any.
And I just say, I think it's good for us from the standpoint of while it might be focused more on the relationship between you as a provider and consumers, I think the same rules apply to us as commissioners and this agency as we deal with the providers themselves in terms of how we handle stuff. So I think that's really good training, Michelle. I appreciate you coming in and doing that. All right, next item on the agenda, back to Chris, family support respite administrative costs.
Okay. Well, one of the approaches I'm trying to take in my job is to ensure that we're fair and consistent in all that we do. Trying to revisit practices that maybe have been developed over the years and consider whether they're needed or justifiable, and whether there's any improvements we can make, stuff of that nature. One of the areas I've never understood was when I was in the provider world is we give providers family support pot of money that they manage. Now that's all state dollars, and so ever since I've been around, DDSN has not allowed providers to allocate administrative costs to that program, and it was not counted in your expenditures of those funds, and thus could increase your payback to DDSN because you're settled on, if you don't spend 95% of those funds, you owe the state back any excess. So as I've looked at this and talked to Mary and Pat and looked at it and considered Medicaid cost principles and how cost allocation should be done, I really can't defend this practice other than they didn't want state dollars spent on admin, which is not a good reason for me. So I'm asking the commission to allow us to reverse that practice and allow providers to begin allocating costs to the family support program. It's very labor intensive. You're talking about a lot of small transactions, paying to very small checks and so forth. And so you've got a lot of effort and zero payment for all that effort actually. So
can I interject, because we go into the service? So if we're asking people to administer a task, we need to pay for it properly. So that's what spurred this discussion. I'm sure there'll be more of these little things that we trip over as we go down this path, but we got to make sure that if we're going to ask them to do something, that we pay for it to get done. Vicky's eating, she's got a snack.
I want to understand, who is the universe of providers that receives these state funds to administer?
all right, so all the disabilities boards that do case management receive an allocation. So for example, Babcock doesn't get any because they don't have a case management program. Rich Lex manages it for them. QPLs tap into a central office care coordinator to access funds that we manage here, which is about $106,000. We are looking at the practices used not only to manage those monies here, but also out in the provider world, because we want to make sure that families have fair access to these funds and that we're not consuming all of the funds for a select few really early in the year. So we are looking at some of those practices. Do you want to speak to that, Mary? I know that's one of the things that we want to make sure.
DDSN has a directive that every agency has a methodology as to how these funds are given out. We haven't looked at that in a long, I haven't looked at it, so I imagine it goes way, way back. So we'd like to make sure there's an equitable, make sure that they do have a practice, that it's not just, there's no rhyme or reason as to how the funds are allocated. But beyond that, we also found that folks are not using all the allocation. Providers, and it's not, and there could very well be lots of reasons for that, because I know in York we send family support funds back. It's because so many folks have gotten waiver slots. So when they used to be getting family support funds for respite, they have a waiver slot for that. And the big one, and I don't know about how everybody else was, we used to pay a lot of money out for incontinence supplies. But that became a state plan service, and so once that became a state plan service, those people didn't ask for it anymore. So, but we never, after things changed, we never went back and looked at usage to see if it needs to be reallocated, if it needs to be allocated differently. Okay. So we need to look at that again. So we're basically looking at the whole Family Support Fund program to make sure we're covering the areas that have the need, that get the money for that, or there's a mechanism to ask for additional if you need it, and to make sure that there's proper procedures out there that the money is given out in an equitable fashion, but more so that we also make sure that we allow folks to take an admin bite at the apple, because it's a discrete service. And if you're checking respite timesheets and writing checks for all these different things, it costs money to do that. And we're asking for it to be done for free. We shouldn't be doing that.
And to Mary's point, the allocation of this pot of money is very stale.
Yeah.
When I asked about it, I don't think they've changed it in the last 4 years. They don't even know. My folks were still looking. We don't know how these original allocations were determined. We have various providers that very rarely use their funds or use very little of it. We've got others that could use additional allocations, and so we're going to be looking at all that. We may even do mid-year amendments this year to redistribute some, because we've got we're behind on the cost settlements with the providers as well. I'm working on that too. 15, 16, 17, and 18. If you line up the family support paybacks for those 3 years side by side, you'll see trends on who's not using their family support money, and then others that are fully spending it every year. So the goal is to have this out there so providers can use it and that they're paid to use it.
Okay.
So I have a few thoughts and questions. My first question is, what are the qualifications to access this fund?
For a family to access it?
Because I know.
I don't know those qualifications.
So when.
It's in the directive, that's all.
You can't have a waiver.
So I am familiar with these funds because when my son was under the age of 5, our EI offered us opportunity to tap into these funds. And at that time, which was about 8 years ago, or 7 years ago, there were, it was not clear in terms of what exactly we could use the funds for. But if I recall correctly, I believe we were able to only use the funds in the summer when he was out of school, that they could be used for therapies that we could not, that we needed, that we weren't getting, activities, respite, kind of a relief to families. But I recall when I had met other families with similar, diagnosis and using services, many of them had never heard of it. And oftentimes I would share it with them about it, and then they would go ask their EI about it. So I'm really glad that you guys want to look at this program, because it can be very beneficial to families, and they're, the fact that they don't get reimbursed administratively, that's probably why many are not sharing the program. So I think it's great and good that you guys are going to look at that and give it more structure.
Yeah, in our case management meeting, I think one of the participants sitting in the audience asked a question too about if a family turned down a waiver slot, they were immediately kicked out as eligible. So we're going to research that as well. So,
Yeah, because families will turn down a waiver slot if they know they only have a couple of hours of respite they need. And it's like, why would I encumber a spot when somebody else needs more? Because there are families out there that'll do that. And it's like, well, then why should you be denied a few dollars of respite from this? Because you're saving the state money.
Yeah.
So, we're looking at all that. Yes, ma'am. And I think a lot of times, some people just don't know that it exists.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, case managers, and this is one of the other reasons we want more engagement from case managers and EIs with their families.
All right, would entertain a motion with regard to the administrative costs under the state-funded family support and respite grants.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is then granted. Next item, Chris, the financial update.
Okay. Again, at this point, we're maintaining the reporting package that you're accustomed to getting. We're going to be revisiting this as well. So you're familiar with what you have under tab 6. We had very few additional bills processed since these numbers are generated. I think it was about $1,000, but when we ran this report a week ago, we had another almost $2 million in bills that we were processing. So this should be very, very close to our final June numbers as things are trickling in now. We're doing really well on managing our expenses. As you can see, we're authorized to spend $782 million. We're only budgeting 718, or our spending plan's only 718 of that. So we spent $9 million less than our spending plan. So we're doing really, really well on managing the expense side. The problem is our revenue side. Pat and I and a lot of other staff are trying to dig into various leaks we have on the revenue side. And so while we underspent our expenditures by $9 million, we still only had less than $200,000 in our bank account at the end of June, which is 0.02% of our budget. So that's as close as you can get to zero without going back. So we've got to jump on this. We've got to make sure that we're on top of this and fixing this very, very aggressively right now. So we're putting a lot of energy in the revenue side. Expenses as well, we're looking at, but it's really a revenue issue. Most of that has to do with rate setting with HHS and getting their attention to say, hey, you're not paying us enough for what we're doing. We're studying historical rates and finding that a variety of increases in the system have not been approved at HHS. So as a result, our rate's lower than it should be. So Pat and I are working really hard trying to get their attention and get those rates fixed. Did you want to add anything to that?
Only if you have a cost element question that Ms. Harrison raised, I can answer that. If not.
Any questions or comments with regard to the report? Seeing none, would entertain a motion to approve the report as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Next item is the contract increases.
Yes, the commission, I believe, has asked that anytime we do an amendment over $200,000 that we bring it through you for review and approval. Of all the amendments we did, these three providers have contract amendments proposed over that amount. For Chesco, we have one additional Band B consumer, 3 CRCF vacancies were filled, and 1 Band I consumer. The total additional award for that is $305,263. Do y'all do these one by one?
We typically don't. I mean, it's sort of submitted as the list here. We
Just
don't have
as
to-
presented.
Okay. So we recommend and request that you approve these amendments. The only clarification I would like to make is on Lauren's. There is a 2020 and an annual difference, so just to explain that. We did two outliers were approved, but we expect them to be temporary. We'll revisit that within 90 days. And so we're anticipating only $138,000 to be spent on these adjustments in 2020, but their contract was bumped up as though they had the funding for the whole year, since they're paid ratably throughout the year. So we don't give them all that money up front.
Any questions or comments with regard to the proposed amendments? Hearing none, would entertain a motion with regard to the amendments.
So, go ahead. You have one.
We have a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of agreeing with the amendments, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, those amendments are approved. Thank you, Chris. State Director's report. Mary.
All right. I've already touched on my first item is that the 2% salary, we've given them the information at HHS. Like I said, they're going to the General Assembly to double check that legislative intent issue. Again, because we have a kind of a system that's a hybrid at the moment, we've got the EIs and the case managers are fee for service, which is a cost-based market rate, not a cost-based, market rate. Now the other services we have are cost-based, so that 2% is just going to go the normal way that you've always figured that part out. So I'm not, as soon as I get an answer, I will definitely let you all know, as well as the provider community. I also indicated last month that we have organizational changes underway. We're trying to marshal our resources where they're needed, but doing it in an interim basis to make sure we're right, because before I do all the HR paperwork to actually do this, which is significant, we want to make sure that we've hit all the right buttons and are doing what is needed for the community. And I was supposed to, today was supposed to start interdepartmental, they're just briefings on what they do. I think that I saw the agenda, it was lengthy. I know we have more to do, and I just said we'll start that in September, but I do have a sheet of contact numbers for you to have, so that way if you get a call and it's in that district, you'll be able to give someone a number to call, so you will be on board with the changes. Again, we're trying to make form meet function, and as we change some of our functions going down the line, because we're changing the way we're doing business, we need to change the form to maximize what we have before we start looking at new positions. We are working on that spending plan for this year. It'll be presented at the August meeting. And I just want to talk a little bit about communication efforts, because again, a lot of what we hear, and well, I didn't hear that, I didn't know that, I didn't get a memo. Again, sometimes you can lead a horse to water, you can have all these options out there, but people have to engage. And I just encourage providers to engage on all the levels that we have out there that we're offering. And please do that. So today will be our first executive director, CEO, top dog, whatever you call that person that's running that agency or company. It's our first meeting of that group of folks. Because there's a lot of folks that don't engage, and we need them to do that. This is going to be a quarterly meeting, and for now, I started on the day of the commission meeting because we always have that day open. And in the calendar, that's the only day that I actually have completely open for the whole year. So we're going to do that on a quarterly basis on the first month of that quarter. We'll discuss why we're meeting, kind of what my expectations are, and I want to hear what their expectations are. And we'll discuss ideas like what the remote access is going to be and sending a designee, because to really have some serious thoughts about that. I want to hear the other side of that story. I'm sorry,
the CEOs and the executive directors of the boards,
All,
QPLs, everything.
Everybody.
Okay. All right.
That's why I couldn't figure out what do we call people. So it's like head honcho, top banana, CEO, whoever that person is.
Okay.
On the 24th, we have our first agency management communication meeting. That's just way too wordy. You got to figure out a cute name for that meeting. I used to call it an ops meeting, where you get down to that level of supervision, all levels of supervision are invited to that, so we can keep the central office staff and the regional office staff informed as to what changes are going on and what road we're heading down and get their input. But I didn't want to call it an ops meeting because I didn't want all Rufus's people to because he's the ops department, and it just, words. Rob McBurney is working with me to set up a family consumer engagement meetings out in the community throughout the state versus having a centralized family advisory council, so to speak. Because we tend to get the same folks there because they're the folks that can make it. We're not reaching the people that cannot get to these meetings, that can't be there. So we're looking at going around the state and doing them probably more than just like when we pick Greenville and we pick Charleston and we pick Florida. We're going to be probably doing it more in small 3-county groupings versus the larger groupings. So again, I want folks, I know how difficult it is to get to meetings in my own life. I just think that if I want to hear folks and what they have to say. Our first topic is going to be more about, as we go through and look at what these waivers have as a service array, do they have any smart ideas as to what else needs to be on there? Because I'm personally thinking of transportation as we're talking about job coaching being really important and people getting employment. What stops a lot of our folks from maintaining employment is that transportation issue. So as I've been doing research of other states, seeing what they have in their waivers, transportation is part of that.
And can I recommend in particular a look at
I haven't done your meeting yet. Okay, no, that's all right.
The Pennsylvania Consolidated Waiver.
Okay.
They just have such a broad array of services.
Okay. I've been looking at some of the ones up in the Northeast because that's where I'm kind of from, but I didn't look at Pennsylvania. All right. We'll be sending out comment cards. Whenever we do a technical assistance documentation, so I know where they've been. I can count all the hours. But what we don't do is comment for the people that we provide technical assistance, to allow them to comment on how that technical assistant was good, did it help, did it not help, was it, useful? We don't get any feedback from that, so we're working on those. And we're also sending out, trying to figure out a survey methodology for our families, and because we don't do a lot of actual service delivery, we contract with all that service delivery. So we're trying to figure out what are we trying to measure. And that might be actually another question I ask when I'm doing these meetings. How can we gauge what you're thinking about what we do? Because overall, we can't probably continue to go out level of service. That might be an year type of thing, but in between we have to have another method of collecting that information. So we're working on that now. I just know that the surveys we sent out before, just like we used to do back in the day in New York, were just too long and wordy and so convoluted that people didn't even understand what the heck you were surveying. It was just all the service matched into one, and folks get confused. I mean, life's busy for a lot of people, so we want to make it very, very simple. So I always talk about comment cards because that's exactly what we used in New York, based on Steak and Shake is where I got the idea. The counterpart, so all of this is we're in the works and we're doing, but we also have our counterpart meetings. I was at one yesterday that had to be 60, 65 people in there. Of folks that were residential providers, the coordinators, and talk to them for a while, and they have meetings and they go over all the regs. Hester Wanamaker does that in every region in the state, gets that done. So there's these meetings going on. There's other communication meetings. It's not just what I communicate or what the commission communicates. That permeates all the way through. So I need to pull all that stuff together so you can see how many actual opportunities out there for people to interact, communicate, learn, listen, ask questions. They're there, but you got to go. I think that's the bottom line. So we have counterpart meetings, we have training, we have the work groups. And like I said before, you can lead a horse to water. We just want to make sure the water's there. So if people are thirsty for that knowledge, we've got the water there. And if they have better ideas on how to do it, I'm all ears about listening to that. As far as our partnership updates, DMH actually asked for a meeting with our executive team to improve working relationship between, not just between the agencies, but between the community people and the community agencies. So to that end, I'm working on a meeting at our next ED work group meeting to actually have all the community mental health directors. They're going to be there, so y'all can meet and greet. Maybe we'll have a vegetable plate too, so it seems very social. You get to know people and start to build relationships, because we know that it's all built on those relationships. And right now, very few counties actually have a relationship with their local mental health agency, and we want to change it. We're doing some cross training. They were desperate for some autism training that we're going to provide. And they're going to be doing some training on mental health issues of folks in our population. And we're also talking about the agreement to staff those going back. We talk about going back to basics. And I'm like Michelle, my problem with that final rule, when it all came down and I got over my anger part, was about, I'm already doing this. How dare the federal government tell me how to do my job? But I'm doing this. So I kind of got ticked off at them first. But then you start really, really realizing what this was. It's more about hearts and minds, and grabbing people to understand that folks get to have. Sometimes for some people, the choice is limited, but they still get to have it. So that's what we're agreeing to, is going back to old school. We're going to staff those difficult cases and work out a solution, instead of saying, that's your person, I'm not doing it, and them saying, that's your person, I'm not helping. It doesn't help anybody when we do this. It makes us all look small. So with the Department of Ed, I met with Molly Spearman. We had a nice spirited discussion about the education of the children, because if you've ever heard me talk about this before, I firmly believe that changes for adults happen because we change the mindsets of parents and children and the folks that they meet in the school. And if they're still in separate classrooms. They're not meeting the future employers of the world. They're not meeting future friends. They're not meeting people, and we need to figure out how to break that down. We had a good discussion on the development of a post-secondary technical training, kind of what we wanted to do at York Place. And so we talked a lot about that. So we're setting up another discussion. But as you know, as we're doing this, we're still working with DOE on the DSP training credentials, so we can start getting some more employees coming out of high school. We have already got our pilots ready to go in York at the technology center there and in Spartanburg. I'm not sure which high school because they've got so many, so I'll have to get that information. But so we're starting, and what we're working on is like a plug and play packet. So other schools do not have to go through the rigmarole of working on the curriculum. We'll say, here it is, and it's based on what we would expect most of our orientation to be. But in the meantime, I think the whole idea is not just to get employees into this field, to introduce that there is a field to a lot of kids coming out of school that they don't even know a field exists, and that they get to choose and meet the folks that we support, and instead of just kind of falling on it because there's no other choices for them to work. We want this to be a real choice. When you speak about choices, when people feel trapped in a job and they didn't make that choice, sometimes they don't like to extend that idea of choice to anybody else either. So that is one thing we're working on. And we're also working on a curriculum to talk about DSP aids, so we can employ some of our individuals with disabilities in our programs to do some of the things we're expecting DSPs to do, but they just don't have the time to do it. And we can train folks to do that. We'll have to look at our requirements. We're working with DSS to continue to work with them to get a written process for counties to utilize. So now that we have agreed upon some engagements and how we'll expedite eligibility for people who are in adult protective custody, now we have to kind of bring it down to the county level so that when the county case manager gets one of these cases, they can open up that, this is who I call. If they don't answer within a certain amount of time, this is how I step it up. And then conversely for the DSS worker, since they change even more frequently than any of our folks ever change, they have a procedure guideline to say, if I take someone to adult protective custody and we suspect, who do I call to see if they're even eligible? Because what we're finding is most folks have already been through the eligibility process. They're already ours. They just don't know. We cross in the night because our processes do not line up at all. So that's what we're pretty well I think we just even had another person placed that was in hospital care, right? Will be, yep. But it was because of the process, they knew who to call. And of course, HHS, we're still working with those service rates. The Mercer report is still in draft. It's still confidential, but we should be sitting down to work with them on the budget probably the week in August. I know his chief of staff's on vacation next week, and then I'm on vacation. As soon as everybody gets back, that's what we're working on. Okay, talking about the budget. The budget development for 2021, there's been a way that they've always done budgets around here. It's kind of like how much we want to grow, how many slots we want to ask for. Right now, Chris has alluded to the issue with the revenue, not alluded to, told us that there is a revenue issue as far as what we have gotten to the point where what we bill, since there's only one residential rate we get reimbursed for, there's too many of those higher funded placements than lower funded placements, so our boat is no longer in sync. And we need to adjust the rates. So there needs to be more than one residential rate is what it's going to come down to. So that is probably how we're going to build this budget, to see what we need to ask for based on readjusting the rates. We have told providers that we are looking at those band Bs and band Is, so we don't put out that $15,000 where somebody only uses 200 of it and it sits out there. But to do that, we've got to readjust their residential rates so it is, so that they can survive. That's the whole idea. It needs to be neutral in its action. So, and we need to get that darn admin contract done and signed. It needs to get in the can. And I want to request that we I'm going to ask that we actually get one signed for last year so we can get reimbursed for the money that we have spent. Otherwise, it's all state dollars that we've expended.
You're talking about admin fees for
the
department.
For the department,
Right.
yes, we need that to move forward. And we can't keep, I would say that if we enter into an agreement with an understanding that, if we find something else we didn't put in there, if we wait for the perfect, the good is sliding by. And at some point, we're gonna have to get something done so we can operate. If we're gonna move forward, it's just one of those dominoes that needs to fall like now. But basically, the budget approach, kind of re-looking at those rates to make everything work for our provider community, they have to be viable. There's just no way around that. And we need to be viable. So when we bill for something, we can't just keep asking for one rate when we bill something up here. When we're paying up here and we're billing down here, we need to close that gap. It's just, I'm not a CPA and I can see it. So, we need to do that. And as Chris said, we continue to find issues as we move forward and we address them as they're coming and as we discover them. And some of those issues are not pleasant. They're not pleasant. We're finding a lot more, we're finding a lot more exceptions than rule. So to talk to people because something was done 10 years ago for them, I feel terrible to say, well, that's not the procedure. That's not how it's done, but that was the promise that was made 10 years ago. So we're discovering a lot of those things. We're trying to mitigate them as they come along. So no one is hurt. We talked about that, the family support funds. We're not out here to say people can't access family support funds. What we're saying is we don't think people are accessing them. Either they don't know about them or they're in areas where they have enough, but we need to send them to areas they don't have enough. So we're finding a lot of that stuff. And, we knew that was going to happen. I was kind of hoping it would be done by now, but it's a long year. There's 30 years of those things in the making. It takes a while to unwind them. We want to make sure that that when we start rolling all this out, that we have built our system strong enough and the definitions clear enough so that we don't have the issue with what is a prep rate. That's in our manual. It's not in the HHS manual. I think it was an effort to describe activities. They're probably billable, but because that word is not used in the other manual, it is causing a lot of angst. We need to get that done. Cleaning toys, that's never been billable. So if somebody describes that as prep work versus let's get our plan together, let's talk about what we're going to be working on today, that very well could be. That's why we want a good definition. And that's what we need to do. The term, and we're finding this in individual employment too, that DDSN, prior to my hiring, they've already started investigating individual employment providers, because what had happened is in 2016, there was $1 million in Medicaid billings for individual employment. In 2019, there was $2 million. It was a 100% increase. So they asked themselves, why is this happening in just a mere 3 years? And based on the boards are fiscal agents for anybody that's receiving services in their catchment area. So if someone bills individual employment, it's going to that local board to be paid. So as the executive director of Max Abilities, I would get an invoice from a company and I would look at it, but I had no supporting documents. So I was expected just to sign it. And for the most part, I did, until one day I got one in that said they did 12 hours of job coaching one day. And I'm like, how in God's name do you do? And with no supporting documentation, I had issues signing that invoice. So we made phone calls, and I found out after a while that I wasn't the only one making those phone calls. And so they started looking into it, and they found that some individual employment providers were submitting very, very high bills. And there was some suspect as to, was that truly individual employment? I was going to say job coach because I'm old school, but that individual employment, or is this more career prep? But when you look at our service definitions, that's why we rewrote some of those guidelines using national numbers as far as typically in the nation, 70 is the number you use. If you want more, you need to ask for it. So as I'm going through it, I hate to say this, but I'm probably going to bring that back to y'all again, because I'm looking at, when we say training, well, I know it means training on the job, but it doesn't say that, so let's go ahead and tighten up our definitions. And if we see it in that, Lord knows we're going to see it in everything. So that's what we're going to have to do to make sure we don't have ineffective services, and we don't have waste, and we don't have people trying to, put stuff in that is not what it's supposed to be. So that is something we're moving forward to, and I want you to know that's going to happen. So we're going to work on our firm guidance. And I think as we get into the fee-for-service world, we're really going to have to make sure our definitions are correct. And that's not just for DDSN, but it's also as guidance to the providers so they can provide an effective service. So, but I see that also, that is a work group. Let's talk about the words, because a word in my head, I get it, I understand it, but I've been doing it 100 years. The people that are just coming into the system, do you understand it? That's what I want to know. And what do you need to be successful? So my individuals that we're supporting get their jobs and are successfully supported. So that's where we're moving to now. And again, I will reiterate this because we've said it more than one time in the commission meetings. It doesn't need to be a rumor, nor have to go through the grapevine. DDSN did not do the cost reports. Pat, get me if I'm wrong, since 2012, right?
What was the last one?
That was the last one. So everybody's well aware of it. There could be recoupments. We've done the 2016, and it looks like about 1.3 million.
Negotiable upwards with the admin contract.
Yeah, if we can negotiate that admin contract, because that's all state funds, and it should, yeah, okay. And in my mind, there should have been an admin contract signed a long time ago. So we know that that is what the first one is. 2017 will be done July 31st. It took a little bit longer than they anticipated. It was supposed to be done in June because our system is so complicated, was the words of the firm that is doing which I totally agree with. And, but after that, once they've set up their parameters and they've done one, the rest of them will go a little bit easier. And we should be getting one going backwards a month after that. We're working on 2018 and 2019, correct? Okay. So I just wanted to get that out there. There's two waivers. It's not just targeted case management, Medicaid target. There's also waiver case management. And let me throw in the third, state-funded case management for those who don't have Medicaid but still need case management. And we have given the list of providers who have exited the system. And and we have done 2 years of looking at people leaving the system as far as quitting their jobs and leaving, and there's been no spike. The biggest spike we ever had was in 2008 and 2009 when we put level 2 case management out there and effectively cut case management in half. But that's been it. So I just wanted to make sure we got good information out there. So I don't want anybody having to rely on a rumor. I'd be more than happy to entertain questions to me. So, but that's about all.
Was there anything within your state director's report that you're asking for any specific?
Well, we have not done budgeting where usually we have a list of things, we ask you to prioritize them. This time we're actually just trying to true up the system so we can see how to move forward from this point. I don't know if that should be a motion because I'm going to be, talking to Director Baker. And before with the final rule thing, we had said,
the motion is to adjust the approach to budgeting.
Is that, if that needs to be in a motion? Because you're going to get the budget.
Sure.
You'll get the budget. Y'all think? Yes? No? I just want to inform you that that's what we're doing.
Okay.
Okay. Did I say anything incorrectly?
Maybe after we present a budget, they might have to have a motion about.
Right, well, yeah.
I want to see it.
Right.
Yeah. Just sort of as the approach itself of how you're taking it. Okay, that's fine.
But I would also tell you that come the next month, I will make sure this is a topic in my director's report all the time to let you know where we're on it. Because we have to have that budget in by September, Pat?
The next year's legislative appropriation budget by the end of September.
Yep. Okay.
And I know we've done this in the past, we've looked at budget, if we have to schedule some sort of additional budget-only focused meeting.
Yes, and you might, because there might be
Especially
some
for
more
doing change.
protracted explanations this
Right.
time.
Yeah.
So I think that would be a
We
wise.
have done that in the past.
Okay, that sounds like a wise choice to me.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Mary. Next item on the agenda is executive session. Would entertain at this time a motion to enter into executive session to discuss contractual matter regarding mentor. I have that motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we will be moving into executive sessions. Take a 5-minute break before we go in there.